All right, so basically what we're doing here today is it's October the 28th, and if you could just state your first and last name.
Yeah, Randolph Camp.
Randolph Camp.
Yeah.
And I am Steve Passmore, and so we are doing an interview for a Veterans History Project today. And if you could state your date of birth.
Yeah, March 12th, 1961.
March 12th, 1961. Okay. And currently we are the only two attending the interview today. And the organization that you're currently working for is the?
Is the Buffalo Veterans Medical Center. I work patient escort. Some people call it patient transport, but patient escort.
Very good. Okay. And you are a veteran?
Yes, yes. Prior Air Force.
Air Force? Okay. And were you involved in any particular conflict?
No, no.
Okay.
Most of my time was peacetime.
Good. And what was your rank?
Staff Sergeant when I was discharged. Staff Sergeant. E5.
Staff Sergeant. And where did you serve?
Mostly in Japan, but when I first got out of boot camp, went to Travis Air Force Base in California, and mostly Okinawa, Japan, and mainland Japan afterwards.
Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to jog your memory a little bit, and I'll ask you a few questions. When you joined, did you were you drafted or did you enlist in the service?
I enlisted voluntarily.
And where were you living at that time?
In a place called Spotsylvania, Virginia.
Okay.
About 50 miles from Washington, D.C., and 50 miles from Richmond, right in between, along Interstate 95. Yeah.
And why was it that you decided to join the forces?
When I was growing up in Spotsylvania, Virginia, very rural, country-like, I would read. I was kind of a nerd in school, and I loved to read books and stuff like that. And I would read about all these places, but financially, my family could not take me there. And college, I don't say wasn't out of the question, but I knew the Air Force could get me around the world to see some of these countries that I would read about in these books. And sure enough, the Air Force took me to just about every country around the world with temporary duty, and then stately, mostly in the Far East, but I would have temporary duties in these other countries. So I was blessed to have gone to every country that I had dreamed about, basically, when I would read these books. When I was, especially when I was like 14, 15 years old, I used to love reading all these books. And the Air Force took me to all these countries that I would read about. So it was like a poor man's version of this, this travel guide. So the Air Force took me around the world, and but I knew that financially, otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see all those countries otherwise.
Right.
So the Air Force was my ticket.
Very good.
My ticket.
Literally.
Right. Yeah, right.
All right. And so, is that why you picked the Air Force specifically, or why was it you joined the Air Force?
Right. I read a little bit about the armed forces, just not in great detail, but in just learn. Before I went to the recruiter, actually, the armed forces recruiter, I knew that was the one that had a lot of bases throughout the world and the U.S. And because I really wanted to travel, I was really a nerd, and I was into sociology and the different cultures. And the Air Force, I knew, with all those bases, had to keep me bouncing around. And sure enough, they did. I was spent a year and a half on a tour at Okinawa, then 2 years in mainland Japan, but I was also in the States. I went to Germany, and Australia, touch bases with these temporary duties, a lot of time in Korea. But I knew the Air Force would take me there versus those other armed forces. So I didn't study too hard but I knew the Air Force was my best chance at traveling. Yeah, right.
And do you recall what your first few days in the service were like?
Oh, yeah. I remember boot camp. Boot camp was Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. And I went through boot camp kind of after high school. It was in July. Hot in San Antonio. And this is my boot camp. And I remember how hot it was in San Antonio, Texas. The temperature one day reached like 109 degrees, 110. And what they did there, for from an outside drilling exercise, they put up a red flag. It says too hot for these guys to go out. So they put up a red, so all your boot camp had to do inside classroom. So, I mean, that was one thing that really stuck. I never been in a hot climate. Country boy from Virginia, and I've never ever been in that kind of temperature. And that's something I'll never forget. That other stuff was where drill sergeant will call you like, you hear names like Cucumber. These nicknames, that's all these the civilians, you're fresh out of high school or whatever, and you're going to the boot camp for the first time. You're in civilian clothes, colorful clothes, long hair, blah, blah, blah. So they put you in this green fatigue type uniform, and they nickname it, hey, Cucumber, come here. Because you're just totally green in that. And you know, it's those kind of terms that kind of sticks out. That all of a sudden you're this Cucumber. And these different military terms that they throw at you and you had to learn. But I thought that was interesting. But San Antonio, Texas, very hot climate, very, very hot.
And do you remember any of your instructors from boot camp?
Let's see, not by name, but I remember this one guy, how he must have been good at his job, because you know, it's like stiffen up camp, or you know, when you're with all that civilian way, you be slouching or whatever, and even when you're marching, your shoulders are lagging, and he had this way of saying stiffen up. You know, he wouldn't say necessarily, you know, sharpen up those shoulders. He had this thing about stiffen up. And I forget his name, but he had to be good, very good, because in 6 weeks, Air Force has one of the shortest boot camps versus the Marine Corps and Army and all that. But in a 6 weeks time, this guy really transformed us into like knuckleheads, whatever you want to call us, teenage know-it-alls, into these, you know, these Air Force soldiers. But he did a good job. And it was so weird how you got all these thoughts about your drill sergeant. Why is he calling me this name, yelling at you, you know, and all this kind of stuff. But when you graduate, you're shaking this guy's hand, you know, you appreciate what he done. But he had this way of just saying, you know, straighten him. I guess I would slouch a lot in boot camp. And it maybe took me a little while, longer than the others, to kind of straighten up my shoulders and march with that, you know, that military, when you're marching, straight shoulders, chest out a little bit. But he would always say, you know, straighten up, camp. But
how did you get through it? You know, were there some tough moments in boot camp? What helped you get through?
Yeah, I think my poor upbringing and hard working. I grew up country like you, strong work ethic, you know, do the right thing, don't back talk. You know, even though this guy was on you, the drill sergeant, you know, calling you every name in the book, and he's got his colorful language that they learn to speak to. But I grew up very respectful of elders or people try to you know, if they're trying to teach you anything, you know, listen, learn, do your job, don't back talk, blah, blah, blah. So it was that kind of thing that would get me through anything. And I grew up poor, where you honor people who are doing something for you. They're doing good, and anything would have been an improvement from where I came from. Everything was like a stepping stone. And so I appreciated everything that I was doing I was 18 years old and just wanted to do better and would do anything to do better.
All right. And some of the experiences that you had when you were in the Air Force, what kind of a job assignment did you have?
That food service, mostly, but there's two different kinds of foods. You can have food service experience in the typical mess hall. In the Air Force, instead of saying mess hall like you would say in the Marine Corps or Army, they would speak in terms of mess hall. Air Force would actually say dining hall. But you have that inside institutionalized cooking in a dining hall, or you can do specialized field training where you're creating a tent city out in the wilderness and you're cooking on gas burners and in a tent city for, it could be 40 GIs or 500 out in a tent city. That's what I love the most. When we went on temporary duty, and a lot of this, I did this in Korea and Japan, and a lot of it was with exercise with another nation or with other troops from another country, and you did the field training. So it was food service, but not cooking in a typical restaurant type setting. This is in the field. It's almost like with the Coleman stove, but picture a bigger version of a Coleman stove, and it's these huge gas burners, and you had to train on how to use those so you don't blow up. The proper air and the gas combination to get that blue flame to turn but it's like a big Coleman stove, but you were trained on how to use it, and you use Armed Forces recipe, some complicated meals, but you was well trained on how to do that. But I enjoyed that feel, like being a country boy from Virginia. I think I love the outdoors anyway, so it was kind of like a perfect match. Yeah.
That's good. And you've already talked about some of the places where you've spent some time. You had said that you had been in Japan for a while. Did you say Australia? Did that?
Yes. I spent a little bit of time in Australia, and sometimes even if it wasn't temporary duty where you go for 30 days or 2 or 3 weeks, when I would take my leave, a 30-day leave, sometimes I would come back to the States and visit my family, and then other times I would just hop on an aircraft, they call it Space A, where a GI could travel free of charge. If a military aircraft was going to Australia or Hawaii and that was space available, you show your ID and you could go, as long as you got your leave orders. So you could travel around the world. And I took full advantage of that. And that was my main objective. I did my military job, but I wanted to travel and see the world, and even part of my leave was spent seeing a country that even if there was a military base, in my leave time I would go there and visit and try to check out that country. But I love Sydney, Australia. There's a beach there called Bondi Beach, just outside of Sydney. It's great. But other countries, even Germany, Okinawa, the island off of mainland Japan. I think there's a Kadena Air Force base there, and there's 2 Marine Corps bases there, pretty huge. But Kadena is a pretty good base, and I love Okinawa, Japan. But these like Australia, that's very nice. I think the Bondi Beach outside of Sydney sticks in my mind, and these places those are memories for a lifetime, and I'm able to tell my grandkids about it, my daughters about it, my son about it, from all my travels. So
that's good.
Yeah.
All right. And can you think of a couple of your most memorable experiences from that time when you were out there?
Oh, sure. I think sometimes let's say being in a tent city, you're out in the field, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're doing some military exercise, and it's peacetime, but you got your downtime now. It's kind of like, what do GIs do in their downtime? Some play basketball, blah, blah, blah. I love to write, I wrote so many short stories in some of that downtime. I remember being in Egypt. I was in Egypt. It was one of those places I've been to. And this is downtime, and it's all quiet. You're in a tent, a little nightlight kind of thing, and I'm there writing in the tent. It could be like 1 a.m. and I'm writing, and it's a short story. I always love to write. But Odessa is very quiet, and I think sometimes probably remind me of Virginia, the quiet, still nights of Virginia. And I had just recently left there, and here I'm in Egypt, or let's say even in Korea, but in a tent city. It's very quiet, and I do my best writing, in that serenity, quiet, solitude, and probably some of my best, what I've noticed now, some of my best short stories had came from that period, and now I'm able to develop it more as I'm older, but I still have some of those notes. Yeah, and and the stories themselves will never go out of my mind. But those short stories are still with me. But I think some of my best writing came from that period when I'm 18, 19 years old, and I'm writing in that tent with no interruptions, and it's very quiet. And but that I'll never forget that. Other than that, the travel itself and meeting some people, let's say in Japan. I would never go to a country and try not to learn the language. So in Japan, I had to pick up, certain numbers of Japan, Ichi-ne-san, and I used to know a whole Roku and telephone denwa, and I used to love the way, I remember I was on base in Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, Japan, and one of the Japanese nationals who worked on base, and they loved to mingle with the GIs and talk to the GIs and stuff. And I'll never forget this. It was kind of the way they teased the new GIs coming on base, and they would say, "Ohio," and you would think, what about Ohio? Are you from? You're looking at this Japanese guy, but he's saying in Ohio, Japanese mean hello. Mm-hmm. But it comes up Ohio. You're thinking he's talking about Ohio, the state, but he loved to see the Americans' reaction. Oh, that means hello. So that means hello. I'm just saying hello to you, and you're standing there trying to figure out what Dayton, whatever. What's about Ohio? What do you want to know about Ohio? Or some guys would say, no, I'm not from Ohio. I'm from New York, or I'm from Virginia. But all he's saying is hello to you, and then he'd break. It's like an icebreaker. And then he'd say, "Oh, that just means hello. I'm just saying hello to you." Yeah. But it's those kind of meeting the nationals whenever I go to the country. One thing I would do, I would collect their currency. Mm-hmm. Like the Korean won, the Japanese yen, whether it was the coins or the dollar form, and I would send it back to the States and to a cousin or niece or nephew. And I love shopping and giving I remember I bought so many kimonos, and you get a kid's version, the more grown-up version, and the prices vary. You can get a cheaper version, or it's very expensive. You can go up from $900, $1,500, and I would get the cheaper version. But I would send them back to the States, to a lot of my female relatives. But I love doing that. Going, hey, they can say Randy he was in Germany, he was in Japan. In Germany, I would get beer steins. You could buy those, and I send them off as souvenir gifts to the folks back in the States. But I love doing that kind of stuff. Education for me and my relatives, they got a kick out of that kind of stuff. They always knew where I was. But I thought for me it was the biggest. It's like going to college in itself, or reading a book, or some people say better than reading a book, but right there in front of you, you experience this culture, and I loved every minute of it. But yeah.
Oh, that's excellent.
Right.
Now you had mentioned some short stories.
Yes.
Do you still have those short stories?
Oh yeah, and now what they're turned into is actually screenplays.
No kidding.
Yes, my short stories and the love for short stories and writing in general has developed to me being a screenwriter.
Oh, that's excellent.
And just last year, I was what do they call it? Semi-quarterless final in this big screenplay competition in Los Angeles. From there's a screenwriters magazine called Fade In Magazine. They sponsored this big contest nationwide, and for 2007, I was a quarterfinalist in one of this competition. I wish I was a finalist, but I didn't make it to the top 6. Mm-hmm. But I was part of this group that at least made the quarterfinalists. And my kids still get a kick out of it, because on the internet you can still see my name. It's still on their website. 2007 quarterfinals, Randolph camp. They get a kick out of that.
Wow.
And that came from 2 screenplays that made it through. But I love writing, but I've noticed that I love it when I start to reflect on past experiences and then your imagination. Some of those short stories have now developed into full-length screenplays. It's like those stories will never leave these characters that you create in your mind. Mm-hmm. They never leave you. And I love creating characters. And so in another form, start out as a short story or a poem or whatever. Now I love screenplays now. I just love that.
Wow.
I notice, but I have noticed a lot of these short stories have developed into feature-length screenplays.
Yeah. Have you had anything produced at all, or
not yet? Yeah. But as we speak right now, there's 3 companies looking at my latest script that I just finished.
No kidding.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Right.
That's
right.
Excellent. Are they looking at features or shorts?
They're feature length.
Wow.
Yeah, and it would be what they call the latest one, drama.
Mm-hmm.
Drama, feature length.
That's great. What kind of things were you inspired to write about during your time in the service?
I think what I like mostly, I think it all stems from being poor in Virginia. I love human life drama, real life drama. And I think growing up in Virginia, being poor, and we didn't have a TV in the house. And I think what drew me to like TV and movies is when I was little, we would sneak to somebody else's house and watch a movie or TV program. Everyone else would take that for granted. But for me to grow up without a TV in the house, it became this big event. And I just loved it. And especially if I identified with a character, as a young boy, I knew I wanted to be a part of what that was all about. I mean, I was glued to that TV if I identified with a character. And I would just, kind of awestruck. But other people in that house, where I was at a cousin's house or whatever, they would just be walking by as if it was nothing. But I grew up in a house without a TV. My father was a very religious man, and it was in the old South. You get these religious folks who say, "No, that's the devil talking. That's Satan." So we're not having a TV in this house. That's that's devil's work. So I grew up in a household like that, but I was drawn to it. I knew I wanted to be a part of that business. Not like in front of the camera, behind. I knew when I was young that I wanted to be behind the scenes and create something. Yeah, and I think being poor, just like Christmas toys, you won't get the bicycle or the little red wagon or the mini bike or this and that for Christmas. We got a little brown bag, had an apple, orange, and some Christmas nuts. And so when you went out in the neighborhood and you see these bikes that other people got, you became creative in how you made your Christmas. And, so I think I had the training when I became creative or imaginative when I was young. You had to. I don't say you was forced to. You just didn't have stuff given to you like other kids. So you had to create your own fun, create your own Christmas, and I think that led into stories. Mm-hmm. And I love these. I don't know. I think just my mind just was just imaginative.
Now,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Now, when you were overseas and you were writing some of these short stories, were you using that as sort of a vehicle to take you back home, to sort of revisit home as though a way to compensate for homesickness, or were you documenting what you were experiencing at the time in the service?
I think a mixture of that. because I noticed even some of the short stories I was writing, let's say I was out in a tent, middle of nowhere, my mind would still drift back to old Virginia or the Rappahannock River. There's something, where I grew up, there's a Rappahannock River that goes through Spotsylvania in Fredericksburg County. There's something about that river, it goes all the way through, it kind of trickles and travels all the way through there, cuts all the way through. And whether it was, you know, that kind of a dreaming thing, even when I was in high school or junior high, thinking about, oh man, I can't wait till I graduate so I can get away from here, you know, and travel and see all these. But I would, you know, sit by this river. You only have to go to a river park in Fredericksburg and the Rappahannock River, whether you're, you know, having a snack or with some friends or whatever. My mind would drift about this river and just, you know, you think of where this river takes you and dream about getting away from here and at that time I didn't know what was up, so I would just dream about leaving. But I noticed when I was in the tents writing these short stories, a lot of stories will have Rappahannock, a river, even if I didn't name it Rappahannock River, that was a river in one of those stories or something like that. It was a story about some guy leaving his hometown, or so it was a mixture. And then the cultures that I would meet when I would travel around the world, maybe a piece of me would be in the story about a guy traveling. And let's say if I was in Japan, I wouldn't specifically write about Japan, but it would be about a guy who's traveling and maybe run into some experience. I had this way of creating you know, it wasn't like to the point what I was experiencing, but in some creative way. Yeah. But it was an avenue, as you say, you know, as your mind drifts, you're on one thought, but you find out a creative way to put that same thought in a more dramatic fashion. And I was kind of good at that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And when you were in the service, were you awarded any medals or citations?
Oh yes, my one of the, even the Air Force Accommodation Medal. One of my temporary duty assignments was I was in Misawa, Japan, mainland, and I had to go near Tokyo. There's an Air Force base there, and the Air Force ran a correctional type facility. Some GIs did some minor offense, you know, maybe threw trash out the window. So they'd spent 30 days at this correctional facility on this Air Force base. So they would bring in people temporarily from these other air bases. You kind of teach. It was kind of like they're in correction, this correction facility for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. These teachers would come, instructors like me. I was staff sergeant. This is just by the time I was getting out of the service. And you would come in and teach them on a subject. And my commander there and my supervisor there, he thought I was given such a, you know, it was a class from about 15 to about 18 people, females and guys. And I taught on sociology, culture, behavior. I say I was a nerd in high school. I love teaching or that kind of thing. Just a whole lot of books and it's mixed with, you know, real, true life experiences. But I loved it. And he thought I was doing a good job, and he wrote me up for the Air Force Accommodation Medal, and I got it. So, you know, they have a way, you know, they put in for it, and you wait a month or two, and I got it for that. He thought I was a good instructor. I love to, I used to say, even I learned very young, you know, there's a teacher in all of us, you know. And one of my daughters, she's going to school now. She's in Iowa. She's in Ames, Iowa. And she's in her second year to be a school teacher. So even when I'm talking, yeah, right. Yeah. But I learned in Virginia, I don't know, it was a pastor. When I was little, you go from one church to the other church to visit the church. You know, there's this phrase, there's a teacher in all of us, you know. It's like, and that kind of stuck. But I kind of get a kick out of, especially younger people, younger than myself, teaching them something. But I always remember that phrase, as a teacher in all of us. But
well, it's definitely a good lesson to pass on.
Oh, yes.
Now, you were involved, it sounds like, with some of the food preparation. What was the food itself like over there?
Oh, yeah. I'll say this. In high school, I worked, as a high school, you worked in a high school. I worked at Howard Johnson's restaurant. They say Hojo's. I worked at Sheraton Motor Inn. I worked at Holiday Inn also. Short order cook, prep cook. And in Air Force, you're doing institutionalized cooking. 100, 200, 500 people. You put in, you may cook, 500 pieces of chicken on a sheet pan. Some people say bland. You won't get that personal touch like grandma's cooking in the kitchen, but you try to get it close to that as possible. So you're going to use salt and pepper, but you may not use those other specialized seasonings to get that grandma's touch. But I enjoyed it. At that time, I loved cooking, and I came from the Holiday Inn and that kind of thing, and I see what they do. I had a fascination with food and love learning about food. But it was so mass produced. I remember we would prep eggs, and for scrambled eggs in a big old pot. You may crack 500 eggs to prepare for that breakfast meal that next day. So it was done on a large scale, and I just remember everything was just so mass produced. You could get a little person with salt and pepper with some seasoning, but a lot of the GIs would say, oh, this is kind of bland. If they could get a hold of ketchup or Tabasco sauce to spice it up a little bit, it was a treat for them when they had an omelet or scrambled eggs. So it was a big thing for them. If we had ketchup, they loved it. Sometimes when you're out in the field, you deal with what you got. So if a guy had scrambled eggs or something, and somebody got salt and pepper, that's better. And sometimes salt and no pepper. But we made do with what we had out in this field. Like I said before, I love field cooking out in the field. But sometimes you didn't have the seasoning to treat the setting as if it was a fancy restaurant. But you may do with what you got. And most of those GI, it was very understandable. They love, the biscuit, the gravy with the biscuits and stuff like that. So sometimes it was foods you've never seen in your life, And some of the guys, would call it, SOS, that on shingles, the pork sarge's gravy on toast. But in the military lingo, they go, shit on shingles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but the technical term was pork sarge's gravy on toast, and but it was good when you're out in the field and you're hungry. That stuff was so tasty, so very tasty. And sometimes in foods that you just love cooking for it would be both females and guys when they come through the line, and they're so glad to have a hot meal versus eating, those, what they call them, MRI, the field rations, and, from the dehydrated foods and K rations or whatever you call it. It was such a blessing to have a hot meal. And it. They let you know, hey, good stuff. Good stuff, it would be without salt or pepper, scrambled eggs, no seasoning, good stuff, thanks. And that made you feel good. That kind of, even simple oatmeal without seasoning. Oatmeal, no sugar, no milk, no honey, no butter, plain oatmeal. But they loved it. And when they would say thank you, that it made your day, made you feel like you was doing something special.
That's excellent.
Right.
And was there ever a time where you were worried that you were going to run out of supplies? You had too many people and not enough. Right.
And that would come up occasionally. Picture coffee. These terms. I don't know if you heard the term hobo coffee. When you're out in the field and the coffee grounds are getting low, and you're short. Supply is not coming in until Friday. It's Monday now. It could be Tuesday. And you need to make do till Friday. You would take those old coffee grinds. You would drain the water. Take the cleanest t-shirt. The cleanest t-shirt. Put those old coffee grinds into the cleanest t-shirt. Wrap it up. and you make another pot of coffee with that. It's been used, but it was so funny finding. It was like, who's got the cleanest T-shirt here? And so you search for the cleanest T-shirt, and you put those old coffee grind into it, wrap it up. So okay, we got another pot for the next day. But it was things like that. You learn to stretch things out. But I'll never forget that, and they call that hobo coffee. So, and you would have a ladle, beat up old ladle, and this big old pot, and you take that ladle and you put it into it. Maybe, hopefully you have some styrofoam cups or whatever. But they call that hobo coffee. You making, those coffee grinds this is the third generation of this coffee, and but they call that hobo. I never heard that term before until I went into the military. But yeah.
Wow. And did you ever feel like you were under significant pressure or stress during those times?
Oh, no. Sometimes you would be at some sites where you in military exercise in case war breaks out, stuff like that. That would be that little tension. You're in training this is a war exercise, and we're training just in case. And for me, being a cocky 18, 19-year-old fresh out of Virginia, want to see the world, I loved it. I loved the excitement for it. I think being mingled with some of the older folks who've been here a while, you can see them because they knew the seriousness of it. They were more seasoned. And but for us young whippersnappers, we kind of loved it, and I don't say cocky, ready for some action, or where something was really going on, because we was on in peacetime, in practice of war, and being young, you think you're more than invincible, and you just wanted some action. That was my attitude. That I wanted more excitement, so I was eager for it, but I could tell by some of the captains and some of these master sergeants been around, they was kind of training us younger guys and maybe had been in some real combat and real war. So they was more even keel, level-headed. They know that, hey guys, something now you look back on it, they know that something could break out. Are these guys ready? But so as I, in hindsight, look back on, those guys was even keel. While we were young, hot-headed GIs, think we know it all, and but they were so calm, teaching us and training us. Have your fun, play, but this is what you do. And I took notice of how they were calm, always train us, and this is what we do in case of war. And we would have our downtime too, but they would keep us straight, so that training us like, if given a call, could you do what you need to do and react in a war situation? So, but when I was young, I think I was just so eager and ready to learn. I probably at the time wanted more action. I don't say I was disappointed that I didn't have more action, but I certainly wanted more at that time of my life. But
and was there anything special that you kept with you or that you did for good luck?
Oh, I think just some of the coins that I would send back to the States as a civilian. I would always send back, but some of the coins were so special. I kept some of them, and because I thought they were special. Whether there was something about them, from a different country. The coins, and I still have a few of those, and it grabs you. I don't know the way it was. Maybe the shininess of it was so different, but I couldn't part with it, and that was something easy you could just stick in your pocket or kind of keep with you, and. Because that was something, I took something from each country, coins or souvenirs, but me personally, the only thing I would have kept myself was certain coins, the metal coins, and still today, I still have some of those, and that's something I never sent to relatives, Yeah, just a handful.
Yeah?
Right, yeah, just a handful.
That's good. All right. And were there any entertainers that that came and saw you while you were out abroad?
No, I would hear about the USO shows and all of that. Unfortunately for me, the only thing we would have no very famous person, but at some of the USO show we would have occasionally a talent show itself on base, where GIs in their free time would put on a talent show, and at that time I didn't particularly take part in none of those shows, but I remember going to one or two of those and enjoying, some of the GIs who had some musical talent or singing talent or telling jokes or that kind of thing. They would take part in that. But any very famous celebrities, I missed out on that. Yeah, my time was 1979 through 85, and I didn't get a chance to meet any celebrities or that type of thing. And
let's see here. So we covered a lot of these questions already about where you went with your travels, and now when you went to those different countries, when you were on leave, what kind of activities did you do when you got to those countries?
Yeah. I try to act like your typical tourist, where I just wanted to learn a little bit about that culture. Like I say, being a nerd in high school, certainly reading about all these countries, now you got a first-hand experience. So let's say Germany, for instance, the Oktoberfest, the cabbage, corned beef. You would read about how the Germans, they love their beer, of course. That's always a given. But food-wise, the Germans love the potato, cabbage, and corned beef. But growing up in Virginia, I had cabbage in Virginia, but I never tasted corned beef. I never really. So being in Germany, I had to taste what this meat, and I loved it. This reddish meat, and I love it. Still today, I love it. So being in Germany, it was like if you had a to-do list and you're down, did your military thing, but in your to-do list in your free time, what to do? Taste corned beef. That's something I had to check off on my to-do list, and I certainly did that. And of course, taste all those, all these dark beers that Germany was so famous for, these German dark lagers, and they kind of bitter taste. But I had to, so as a high school student, read about it. Now, taste it, real life is, see with your own lips, taste this with your own taste, but taste this, see what it tastes like. But corned beef, I got a kick out. For the first time in my life, I taste corned beef going to Germany, and some of the beer. But and the Oktoberfest itself. They loved it. For that whole month, they really celebrate. But, then you got all those famous, the Polish sausages, the bratwurst, the knockwurst, and all that stuff. The sauerkraut. I won't speak too highly of sauerkraut, but they love it. I can sprinkle a few strands, but they pack it on. But I love tasting these foods for the first time in Japan. Japan, one of my favorite Japanese dishes, and I would read about the Japanese culture, and I knew about yakisoba. I had never tasted it in Virginia, but read about it. Very, very equivalent to the Chinese chow mein, noodles and vegetables. But yakisoba is one of my favorite Japanese foods, and it's like a Chinese version of their chow mein, noodles and some vegetables, but the Japanese would say yakisoba. And very, very tasty dish. And here in the States now, if I get a chance, I'm near a Japanese restaurant, I'm going to order yakisoba. I love it. But
now, can you think of anything in your mind that when you look back on it, you really just laugh about a humorous event that may have occurred while you were out doing your duties?
The military style duties. All of the out in the field, and water buck. When you need to take showers or something out in the field, they have to bring in the big water buff, these huge tank. It's like on wheels, nothing but a water storage tank, and they will call, oh, we got 3 water buffaloes. But let's say they've been there 4 days, no one's telling you that they're empty. So they may be hooked up to these lines where you go to this other part of the tent city and take a shower. You're all undressed, turn the thing, there's no water. No one passed that. I mean, it's stuff like that. No one tells you, oh, the water buffalo's been empty for a day. We're going to have 3 new water buffaloes tomorrow by noon. But you're out ready to take a shower and there's no water. It's stuff like that. Sometimes the gas burners, it's kind of sad. Let's say you're ready to fire up some eggs, but your gas burner is out in the field. It's stuff like that, and you're searching around to make do and find a gas burner that is full of gas and ready to be fired up. Other funny situation, it's things like searching for toothbrushes. I mean, it's like out in the field, those things like that are worth $1 million. Toothbrushes, deodorant, soap. I don't know if a human situation, but you can become creative. Let's say when you're out of soap, so you use shampoo. I mean, everybody, that's typical, but it's things like that when you have to become creative out in the field. And sometimes there's some weird, funny situations that you have to, if you don't have a toothbrush, of course, use your fingertip and just go like that with whatever you got. And sometimes, and now it become commonplace where Crest and all those, they having baking soda put into the toothpaste. But out in the field, we was doing it all along, because there was no toothpaste. So you would take baking soda, whatever was in the kitchen, and go like that to freshen up your mouth. But Crest and those guys, they now added into the toothpaste. They finally it whitens your teeth and freshens your breath. But out in the field, we was doing it as GIs all along. But
now, did you ever get together with groups of other people and play a prank on individuals, or ever have a prank pulled on you that you can think of?
What you hear? Typical. There again, most of your stuff. If it didn't come in boot camp, typical shaving cream in the shoe kind of thing. It was out in the field doing similar stuff. Some of the stuff I can think of is the wind-up alarm clocks. It's the guy just pulled 12 hours on guard duty, and he just hit the sack. And some guy, hey, let's set the alarm, the little wind-up alarm for an hour from it. The guy just laid his head down from 12 hours of walking the beat on guard duty. I mean, little silly stuff like that, and you just laugh when he wakes up. And he actually thinks, God, I just laid down. Is it 5 hours already? Is it morning? But, and everyone laughs. But, he only had hours of a nap. He thinks it's morning already. But, no, go back to bed, God. We just messing with you, silly things like that. But other than shaving cream, I seen that a lot. Shaving cream in a boot or stuff like that. But nothing more, nothing too serious. Yeah, all in playful fun.
And what did you think about your officers or fellow soldiers?
Oh, okay. Pretty good. One of the, there's a serious side to that question, and then a more typical. You love anyone who teaches you. Like I grew up in Virginia. You respect anyone who teaches you anything, and I grew up that way. But the other serious side, kind of sad. growing up in the South and very sensitive to the racial issue, sometimes, and this was something that was very noticeable to me. Let's say if that was a young white officer, maybe went to West Point, went to college, now he's a captain, lieutenant. Sometimes you would run into problems where the other race wouldn't salute each other, or it would go both ways, or let's say there's a young black officer who just went to West Point, went to college, and now he or she is a lieutenant, captain, or higher, and a white guy who's a master's, I've been in 20 years, crusty, know the military, through and through, die hard. It would be sometimes hard, for that white enlisted person to salute that young black officer because of where he grew up in the country. And you would see that. And all you have to do is bring your arm to just salute. You have to salute officers. And you would see them trying to get away with, how you doing? Just a little head nod. See if they can get away with that, because it kind of bothered them if they had to bring the hand all the way up and salute. It kind of brought deep down. And I grew up in this side. I kind of understood that racial issue. And then sometimes the black officer would say, excuse me. So that would be that brief moment of a little tension or awkward moment. And, the officer would say, excuse me. And the white enlisted person would say, okay. And they more or less was forced to do the salute. Hated every moment of it. But that would go both ways sometimes. But as a young country person coming out of Virginia, I grew up, so my younger years in the 60s, early 70s in Virginia, and I seen both sides and a lot of traumatic stuff. So in the military, you see pieces of it still within some people, and tied back to my writing and creative writing, the human drama that I love comes out in my stories. That human interaction where this guy has some deep down feelings. Even though I'm in the military, I have to do my job, not get in trouble. But I got some deeper feelings from how I grew up, or what I've been trained in my brain from where I grew up, these different parts of the U.S. So I love just sitting back. You're kind of that fly on the wall, just seeing human action, in action, how races react. That's why I love you. Kind of like a reporter, and always the writer. You always like watching, observing, and learning. And I love watching humans and reacting that kind. I took notice how races react to each other. And I think in some of my stories, that stuff comes out in a creative type of way. I think my stories and screenplays that I write today got little pieces of all of that in there. But yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, did you keep a personal diary separate from the short stories that you wrote, or were those sort of like a diary for you as you went through?
Right. I think either mentally or jot down notes for short stories and little notes. It was kind of like my mental notes, like a journal. Because even in 8th grade, our teacher had us keep a journal. And I always remember journals. But when I got older, it wasn't a journal per se, but my writings, I think, was similar to a journal. Yeah, so, because I think whether you force yourself or you can't help whatever you're writing, pieces of you come out in your writing, whatever you're going through. So it's kind of like if you were to write something down and 2 years later took a look at it, someone from the outside can read that. They may not can pinpoint where you, but they can get a kind of a view of who you were, what you kind of was going through, just from what you wrote 2 years ago. Yeah, so my stories have little pieces of me when I was in the military, going through my experiences. Yeah, but yeah.
And so, do you recall the day that your service ended?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Matter of fact, it's kind of a two-part thing. I was at Misawa Air Force Base in Japan, but matter of fact, the military lingo comes out again. There's this term when you're getting short. Oh, he's getting short. You're a short timer. When you're down to 30 days, 45 days, they call it short timers attitude. You're on your way out. But I was in Misawa, Japan, so as I was being discharged 30 days from now, I was to be discharged back at Travis Air Force Base, back where I started from, one of my original bases. And so you go through these debriefings, they call it. And but as you're winding down, you notice you're kind of saying goodbye to Japan, friends you made, because it's going to be 30 days until you go to California and be discharged from the Air Force. So you got this month or so in Japan, but you know you're getting out. So you're kind of saying your goodbye to some friends you made, kind of to the Air Force. You're kind of going to God. I'm not going to be a GI anymore, that kind of thing. So you got a little time to think about you being a civilian all over again and that kind of thing, and then it really going to hit you when you go to the state. Mine was different because I was in overseas, and then versus being in the States. And then you get your discharge from the States. So I was going from overseas back to the States. I had to get reacquainted with being in the States again. And that was kind of different because I was in Japan for a little while. And but it takes a while to sink in. And you do have thoughts, you know, and I don't say scary thoughts, but it's like, God, I won't be a GI anymore. You have to think about, you had already went through it, do you want to re-enlist for another 4 years? Because all that's thrown at you. And I did original 4 years, and I did an additional 1.5 years, but I felt it was time for me to get out. So when I made I think I was ready to go back home and get back into the civilian world. But I think for me, I was just thinking about what am I going to do now? And I did a lot of food service, and I jumped back into the food service world. and that's what I did when I got out of my military, the Air Force. I became a regular cook at this hospital in California. Yeah, so for me, it starts like that. You do have a lot of thoughts about your separation and what you're going to do as a civilian. So I think I made the transition okay.
Yeah. And did you make any close friendships while you were in the service? Oh, yeah. One of the sweetest things right now, I just mentioned Travis Air Force Base, and that's outside of Fairfield, California. After boot camp, Travis was my first Air Force base. A lady who married an Air Force guy when she was a young girl in the Philippines. So now she's working as a civilian on base at Travis in the dining hall. Mm-hmm. She's a cashier. As a young 18-year-old guy going to Travis Air Force Base working on, I met her. Her name is Helen. She's like my second mother. Still today, I call her my second mom, and we're friends today. Wow. We're kind of speaking terms. I'm either going to say second mother or godmother. We're still friends today, very close. And that friendship is so strong. I would visit her home, met her husband, her other kids. When I was at Travis Air Force Base, being a GI on the barracks, she wouldn't let me spend the holidays on base as, you know, the single GI. You know, she would tell her, no, I'm going to bring Randy out to our house, and he's going to have Thanksgiving here with us. So that was so precious and special, and we're so close today. She's still like my second mother. You talk about a special friend, so it's even stronger than that. Mm-hmm. And I got a phone number and everything. Yeah, we keep in touch. That is excellent.
Yeah.
And once you were out of the service, did you join a veterans organization?
Oh, no. Like those VFW groups or that type of thing. No. The only thing that I got involved with, and I learned about it when I was in the military, was I Have a Dream Foundation. It wasn't a military. It was this organization. Say, we would tell kids in bad neighborhoods, if you finish high school, we would pay for your college or vocational school, and it targeted kids in bad neighborhood, gang-infested neighborhood, that type of thing. And it was an organization. It's one of my favorite charities, but they weren't associated with a military, like a VFW type group.
Right.
So.
And so after the war, you talked about going on and then cooking for a hospital. Where did you go from there career-wise?
Oh, yeah. Dad went to security jobs. I love my military experience and all that, but police forces, security company, they love prior military folks. So if you got your DD-214, so that you was an ex-Marine, Air Force, Army, Navy, security companies, police forces, FBI, they all love to have you. They love to have you. I felt the police force wasn't for me, but I did take advantage of the security. So I got a decent job as a security officer at a TV station in California. Yeah, when I got out, so I fell in love with California, even though I'm from Virginia. So I stayed out there for a good little bit. So, but the security job, which was they loved prior military, and so I just fell into that. Got my security guard license and all that stuff, and kind of liked it too. Just meeting different people. I was working at a TV station, so I got familiar with how the TV station. And with that love of writing, I always mixing, as you're trying to elevate yourself into what your dream would be. My dream is to, sell a screenplay or that kind of thing. So being able to, little by little, learn about what you're doing, your profession, or what you're being guided towards. Being a writer, just learning the TV industry, how it works, who's involved with it. I love that. I met so many people working at that TV station and how it operates, how it functions. It was like going to film school. It was like a poor man's version of going to film school by being a security guard, working at that TV station. And then you learn terms about networking too. In Hollywood, it's you network. It's who you know and what you know. So even when I was there, I was like picking up things. So.
Where in California was the TV station?
In Los Angeles.
Oh.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, yeah.
Was it a major network or?
No. This TV station, even though they would rent out sound stages for like a movie production, it was a PBS TV station. But they had big sound stages where in early Hollywood it was protected by the Historical Society because a lot of the silent movies back in the 20s and 30s and some of your movies from the 30s and 40s was shot there. Now it's a TV station, but part of the lot was a movie production studio, and these famous movies was shot there, and the Historical Society would protect that part of that studio, and these tours would come onto the studio, and I loved that. They wouldn't be here for the TV station, the PBS, but they was here for old Hollywood as a tourist, and I loved that part of working there at that station because I got a piece of old Hollywood, and plus the current modern day TV station on the other side of the lot. So, but we would meet all these people coming in at the gate. So as a security guard, you know who was coming, who was going, and what was going on. But I learned a good bit of Hollywood history just by working there. So, and being a screenwriter or expiring screenwriter, it was all education to me, and loving every minute of it. Oh yeah.
Wow. Did any celebrities come through?
No, that one, that's where I met. Because at that PBS station, even Dick Van Dyke, Sally Field, Debbie Allen, Felicia Rashad, the two sisters, because Debbie Allen, the two sisters, but two different last names. But they shot a movie there for PBS, and it was shot there. Sally Field shot a film, and Dick Van Dyke, he shot a film there. Just to name a few. But Tavis Smiley, he still today tapes his TV show there. He's like a version of Charlie Rose, where he does a one-on-one interview with politicians, music industry folk, film industry folks, and people in the sports world. But Tavis Smiley show is taped there, and as he meet, Prince, John Travolta, all these folks have to come there for the taping, and they have to come through that security gate. So I got a chance to meet all of these. But I think John Travolta and Prince drew people out of their office when they came onto the lot. Everyone came out of their office to just get a glimpse of it as they walked back to the soundstage to tape the Tavis Smiley show. But we had to check them in, at the security gate.
That's right.
But and I got a kick out of that stuff. But for me, I looked at it as still today I call it a poor man's version of film school, because I got a chance to see how Hollywood worked. That how it really, managers, agents, PR people, all these, the crew, what they call it, the entourage. It's funny how one celebrity may have 2 assistants, another one may have 12 makeup people, and all these, God, these big celebrities, they may have 12 people, this entourage, my God. Yeah, and that was, I got a kick out of it, actually, because you would read about this, or read or hear about it on Entertainment Tonight, all these, that kind of thing. But to see it face up with your own eyes, and I loved it. But always kind of taking mental notes. Always taking mental notes as a writer. Maybe one day that guy or that female will be in one of my movies that I will write. Always wishing and hoping that I would break through and get my foot in the door. And hopefully, I'm still wishing and hoping. Yeah,
so. It sounds like you've got your iron in the fire.
Yeah, right.
Different things. You've got some different production companies interested in.
Right. I mean, right today, and kind of like got my fingers crossed for this one particular script right now. Excellent. As we speak.
Very good.
Who knows?
Now, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Oh, I think when I went in, let's say prior service, the subject of being a old country boy from Virginia, very little money from, financially strapped, or whatever you want to call it. The Air Force was such a blessing for what I wanted to do, and as it channeled me out of Virginia, allowed me to see the world, and allowed me to have my experiences and to become the person I am today. As I reflect, probably making me a better writer today than I would have been. Let's say if I wasn't in the Air Force, went to all these different countries, met all these different people, who knows what kind of writer I would have been if not for that. So anybody who's thinking about like joining the Air Force or what the military had done for them, that experience of traveling, you can't put a price on it. I know today in wartime situation, there's a lot to think about. You're putting your life on your line. Even in peacetime, you're putting your life on your line, but it's that question mark because it's still peacetime. So it was different from when I went in, from 79 to 85. But for the folks who's coming in now, is without a doubt, you are putting your life on the line. And that's a big, heavy question to consider. But God bless those people who are doing it and say, I want to do it. But the added benefits from traveling, the people you can't put a price on that. I know for me, better than a college book, better than sitting in a classroom and reading about it in a textbook. And I know I'm forever grateful. And I think it comes out in what I write, my experiences, and I think it just made me a better person. What I'll say to anybody who's thinking about joining the military, do thinking about your life, college, military. Do I want to put my life on the line right now? That is a heavy, heavy-weighted decision. But other than that, the experience you're going to gain from traveling, for me, was priceless. I can say it's better than a book. Better than a book, priceless. And still today, I tell a lot of people, from my experience, I can't put a price on it, and priceless. But for the young people today, thank God for them. I hear, they're volunteering. Sometimes, no draft, and there's a lot of, we don't have to use the mandatory draft. A lot of, God bless them. God bless them, because that is a heavy decision. When a young person says, I don't want to put my life on the line, but where do I sign? Yeah, I'm impressed with that. Actually, I'm impressed with that. I thank God. Good for them. Because that's not an everyday decision, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I'm impressed with that, in general. But
well, that's excellent. Well,
yeah.
Well, it's been great having you in today and getting a chance to hear your story.
Yes.
I mean, you've gotten to see the world and to document it through your writing along the way, and
Yes.
that's a passion that's still with you today.
Oh,
and,
yes.
So I mean, it's very exciting to see that and to get to hear your words. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming in today here
My
at the
pleasure.
VA in Buffalo, New York, and all the best to you in the future.